Chapter 1. The king returns with blood on his hands. The grand hall of the Silvercrest court had never been this silent. Alara Thorne pressed herself against the cold marble pillar, her heart hammering as every noble, council member, and guard in the room turned toward the massive oak doors. She'd been working in the palace kitchens for only 3 weeks, long enough to learn that when the entire court held its breath, something terrible was about to happen. The doors burst open with a force that sent them crashing against stone walls. He stood there like a figure carved from shadow and moonlight. Tall, impossibly broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell just past his collar, and eyes that gleamed an unsettling amber in the torchlight. Blood streaked across his torn shirt, his knuckles raw and crimson. But it wasn't the blood that made Alara's breath catch in her throat. It was what he carried. Cradled against his chest was a small bundle wrapped in what looked like a tattered cloak. From within the fabric came the softest sound. A whimper, weak and trembling. "Your Majesty." Chancellor Rothman's voice cracked as he stepped forward, his face pale. "You are not expected back for another—" Silence. The single word cut through the hall like a blade. King Darius Shadowmere didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The command in it was absolute, primal, something that made every instinct in Alara's body scream at her to run. But she couldn't move. None of them could. Darius moved through the parted crowd, his footsteps echoing against stone. Alara caught glimpses of his face as he passed. Sharp angles, a jaw set with tension, and those eyes. God, those eyes. They weren't quite human. They swept across the gathered nobles with something between contempt and exhaustion. "Someone get the healer," he commanded. "Now." 3 servants scattered immediately. Alara found herself stepping forward before her mind could catch up with her body. She'd been trained as a nurse before everything fell apart. Before she'd fled her village with nothing but the clothes on her back and forged documents that claimed she was someone else entirely. "I can help." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Every eye turned to her. She felt the weight of their stares, the confusion, the disdain. A kitchen girl, speaking unbidden to the king. Darius's gaze locked onto hers, and the world seemed to tilt. Those amber eyes held something ancient, something that made her skin prickle with awareness. For a moment that stretched too long, he simply looked at her. Really looked, as if he could see straight through to every secret she carried. "You." His voice was rougher now, edged with something she couldn't name. "With me." He didn't wait for her response, already moving toward the eastern corridor. Alara's legs carried her forward, following him past the shocked faces of nobles and the narrowed eyes of the chancellor. Her hands trembled as she clutched her apron, but she forced them steady. Whatever was in that bundle needed help, and apparently she was the only one foolish enough to volunteer. They climbed a spiral staircase to the private wing, a place servants whispered about but never entered. Darius kicked open a door to what must have been his personal chambers. The room was sparse, almost austere. No gold, no tapestries, just dark wood furniture, a massive bed with black sheets, and windows that overlooked the forest beyond. "Close the door," he ordered, moving to the bed and finally, carefully, laying down his burden. Alara obeyed, her heart racing. As she approached, she finally saw what he'd been carrying. A child. A little girl, no more than 5 or 6, with tangled blonde hair and a face streaked with dirt and tears. Her dress was torn, and even from here, Alara could see the angry red marks across her arms. Scratches, deep and vicious. "Oh my God," Alara whispered, immediately kneeling beside the bed. Her training kicked in, pushing aside fear. What happened to her? "Rogues," Darius's voice was flat, but she heard the fury beneath it. They attacked a border village when I got there. He stopped, his jaw clenching. She was hiding under the floorboards of a burned house. Alone. The weight of that single word hung heavy in the air. Alara's throat tightened. She'd seen enough tragedy in her own life to understand what alone meant. I need clean water, bandages, and something for the pain, she said, forcing herself to focus. Do you have... Darius was already moving to a cabinet, pulling out supplies with practiced efficiency. Not what she'd expected from a king. He set everything beside her, then stepped back, his massive frame somehow seeming uncertain for the first time. Will she live? He asked quietly. Alara examined the girl carefully, checking her pulse, her breathing, the wounds. The scratches aren't deep. She's in shock, dehydrated, but... Yes, I think she'll live. Something in his shoulders relaxed, just slightly. As Alara began cleaning the wounds, the girl stirred, whimpering. Her eyes fluttered open, bright blue, terrified. She looked at Alara, then at Darius, and instead of crying out, she reached for him. Alpha, the child whispered, her small hand stretching toward the king. Darius moved without hesitation, taking her hand in his much larger one. His expression softened in a way that transformed his entire face. I'm here, little one. You're safe now. Alara's hands paused. Alpha. The word echoed in her mind, stirring old stories her grandmother used to tell. Tales she'd dismissed as folklore, as superstition meant to keep children from wandering into dark forests. But looking at Darius Shadowmere now, at the way shadows seemed to cling to him, at those impossible amber eyes, at the way he held that child's hand with a gentleness that contradicted the blood still drying on his skin, Alara felt the first cold finger of understanding trace down her spine. The stories weren't stories at all. What's your name? She asked the girl softly, trying to keep her voice calm even as her worldview cracked and reformed. Mira, the child whispered. Mira, I'm Alara. I'm going to take care of you, all right? This might sting a little. As she worked, she felt Darius watching her. Not the girl, her. The intensity of his attention made her acutely aware of every movement, every breath. When she glanced up, she found him staring at her hands as they moved gently across Mira's wounds, his expression unreadable. You're not afraid, he said. Not a question. I'm terrified, Alara admitted, meeting his eyes. But she needs help more than I need to run. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe. Or recognition. What's a kitchen girl doing with a nurse's training? He asked. Her hands stilled for just a moment. What's a king doing covered in blood? The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. Protecting what's mine. The possessiveness in his tone sent a shiver through her. She returned her attention to Mira, but she could feel the question hanging in the air between them, unspoken but heavy with implication. What else did he consider his? And why did some buried, irrational part of her want to know the answer? Chapter 2. Shadows Don't Lie. Alara stayed with Mira through the night. She hadn't meant to. The plan had been to bandage the child, ensure she was stable, then slip back to the servants' quarters before anyone noticed her absence. But every time she tried to leave, Mira's small hand would tighten around hers, those blue eyes filling with fresh tears. Please don't go, the girl whispered. The shadows. They come when I'm alone. So Alara stayed, perched on the edge of an armchair that probably cost more than she'd earned in her entire life, holding the hand of a traumatized child while the king of Silvercrest paced like a caged animal across his own chambers. Darius hadn't left either. He'd cleaned the blood from his hands and changed into fresh clothes, black pants and a loose white shirt that did nothing to hide the powerful lines of his body. But he hadn't dismissed her, hadn't ordered her back to her station. Instead, he'd positioned himself by the window, staring out at the forest with an intensity that made Alara wonder what he saw in those shadows. Every so often, his gaze would drift back to them. To Mira first, checking on her with an attentiveness that surprised Alara. Then to her, and those moments felt different. Heavier. Like he was trying to solve a puzzle he hadn't expected to encounter. "You should rest," Alara said softly, careful not to wake Mira, who had finally drifted into fitful sleep. "You're injured, too." Darius glanced down at his side, where his shirt clung to what was clearly a wound beneath. "It's nothing. It's bleeding through your shirt." "I heal fast." The words came out too quickly, too defensive. Alara filed that away, with all the other impossible things she'd noticed tonight. The way his eyes seemed to glow in the dark. How he'd carried a child through what must have been miles of forest without breaking a sweat. The absolute authority in his voice that made grown men tremble. "Let me look at it," she pressed. "Unless you'd rather explain to your court tomorrow why their king collapsed from blood loss." His jaw tightened, but after a long moment, he crossed to the sitting area. He moved with a fluid grace that reminded her of predators in the forest, all coiled strength and controlled power. He sat in the chair opposite hers, the small table between them suddenly feeling inadequate as a barrier. This close, she could see the exhaustion lining his face, the tension in his shoulders. This close, she could smell him, pine and smoke and something wild she couldn't name. "You're staring," he said, though his eyes were fixed on Mira. Heat crept up Alara's neck. "You're bleeding. And you're avoiding my earlier question." He turned those amber eyes on her fully. "What's a woman with your skills doing scrubbing pots in my kitchen?" Alara's throat went dry. She'd known this was coming. In the heat of the emergency, she'd revealed too much, acted on instinct rather than caution. Now she'd have to lie to a man who looked like he could smell deception. "I needed work," she said carefully. The kitchen master didn't ask many questions. Most people run toward opportunities. You seem like you're running away from something. The observation hit too close. Alara focused on Mira's sleeping face, using the child as an excuse to avoid his gaze. "Maybe I just wanted a fresh start." "In the most remote court in the Northern Territories?" His voice held a hint of dark amusement. "People don't come to Silvercrest for fresh starts, Alara. They come here to disappear." The way he said her name, low, deliberate, sent a shiver down her spine. She forced herself to meet his eyes. "Then perhaps we have something in common, Your Majesty." The corner of his mouth lifted, and it transformed his entire face. For just a moment, he didn't look like a terrifying king. He looked almost human. "Perhaps we do." The moment stretched between them, charged with something Alara didn't want to examine. Finally, she cleared her throat. "Your wound?" Darius hesitated, then began unbuttoning his shirt with efficient movements. Alara told herself she was a professional, that she'd treated dozens of patients, that this was no different. She was lying to herself. When he pulled the fabric aside, revealing a muscled torso marred by 3 long gashes across his ribs, Alara had to force air into her lungs. The wounds were deep but already beginning to close, something that should have been impossible. "When did this happen?" she asked, reaching for clean water and bandages with hands that threatened to shake. 6 hours ago." 6 hours. These wounds should have still been bleeding freely. Instead, they looked days old. Alara pressed a damp cloth to his skin, feeling the heat radiating from him. Not fever, Something else. Something that made her pulse quicken with a mixture of fear and fascination. "You weren't lying about healing fast," she murmured. "I don't lie." His voice had gone rough. "About anything." Her hands paused against his skin. She could feel his heartbeat under her fingertips. Strong, steady, slightly faster than it should be. When she glanced up, she found him watching her with an intensity that stole her breath. "What are you?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Darius went very still. The air between them seemed to thicken, crackling with tension. For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then, slowly, he reached up and caught her wrist, not roughly, but firmly enough to stop her movements. "Careful, little nurse," he said softly. "Some questions have answers you're not ready to hear. Maybe I'm stronger than you think." His thumb traced a circle, against her pulse point, and she knew he could feel how her heart raced. "Oh, I think you're very strong. Strong enough to walk into danger without hesitation. Strong enough to stand your ground when my entire court cowered." His eyes searched hers. "Strong enough to be running from something that terrifies you more than I do." Alara tried to pull her hand back, but he held firm. Not painful, but inescapable. "What did you do, Alara Thorne?" he asked. "What are you so afraid will find you?" "Nothing. I did nothing wrong." The words came out too fast, too defensive. "I believe you." The certainty in his voice surprised her. "But someone hurt you. Someone made you believe you had to hide." Tears burned behind her eyes, and she hated herself for it. She never cried. Not when her village turned on her after her grandmother's death. Not when they called her witch and devil's spawn. Not when she'd fled with only the clothes on her back and her grandmother's old medical books. "Why do you care?" she whispered. Darius's expression shifted, something almost like confusion crossing his features. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I do." Before either of them could say more, Mira stirred, whimpering in her sleep. Darius released Alara's wrist immediately, his attention shifting to the child. Alara used the moment to gather her composure, finishing the bandaging with quick, efficient movements. "She's calling for her mother," Darius said quietly, pain evident in his voice. "You said she was alone." "She was the only survivor." He stood, moving to the bed to brush hair back from Mira's forehead. The gesture was so gentle, so at odds with the dangerous king who had walked into that throne room covered in blood. "The rogues killed everyone. Her parents, her siblings, 23 people total." "Rogues?" Alara repeated. "You mean?" "Wolves." He said it simply, watching her face. "Wolves that have lost themselves to the beast. They hunt, they kill, they destroy everything in their path." Alara's mouth went dry. "And you stopped them." "I killed them." No remorse, just fact. Every last one. She should be terrified. She should be running for the door. Instead, she found herself asking, "Will there be more?" Darius turned to her, and in the candlelight, his eyes gleamed with that impossible amber glow. "There are always more. The question is why they're getting bold enough to attack villages under my protection." "Someone's commanding them," Alara said, the pieces clicking together. "Someone wants to challenge you." The approval in his gaze made her chest tighten. "Smart as well as brave." "I'm not brave. I'm just..." She looked at Mira's sleeping form. "Some things are more important than fear." "Yes," Darius said softly. "They are." They stood there in the quiet, an unconscious child between them, the weight of unspoken truths heavy in the air. Alara knew she should leave, should put distance between herself and this dangerous man with his impossible, healing in Predator's eyes. But when he looked at her like that, like she was something precious he'd unexpectedly found, Leaving felt impossible. "Stay," he said. Not a command this time. A request. "She trusts you. That's rare." "I can't. People will talk. I'm just a servant. You're under my protection now." His voice held that absolute authority again. "Both of you. Anyone who has a problem with that can bring it to me personally." It wasn't a solution. It was a complication that would draw exactly the kind of attention Alara had been trying to avoid. But looking at Mira, remembering the fear in those blue eyes, Alara found herself nodding. "Just for tonight," she said. Darius smiled, slow and knowing. Of course, just tonight. But they both knew it was a lie. Chapter 3. When the pack comes calling, dawn broke with the sound of howling. Alara jerked awake in the armchair, her neck stiff from the awkward angle. For a disoriented moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then she saw Mira still sleeping peacefully in the massive bed, and Darius standing at the window, his posture rigid. The howls came again, multiple voices, rising and falling in a pattern that sounded almost like language. "What is that?" Alara asked, her voice rough with sleep. Darius didn't turn. "My council. They're calling a meeting." "That's a strange way to summon people." "It's our way." He finally looked at her, and something in his expression made her heart clench. Resignation, maybe? Or dread. "You should go, before they arrive." Alara stood, smoothing her rumpled dress. "Will Mira be all right?" "I'll watch her." He crossed to the bed, checking the child's forehead with a gentleness that still surprised her. "But you need to leave. Now. What's about to happen? You shouldn't see it." Pride warred with common sense. Alara knew she should listen, should flee back to the safety of the kitchens and obscurity. But something in his tone, in the tension of his shoulders, made her hesitate. "Are you in danger?" Darius laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I'm always in danger. It comes with the crown." He moved toward her, and Alara found herself backing up until she hit the wall. He stopped just short of touching her, one hand braced beside her head. "But today, they're going to question why I brought a human child into the heart of our territory. Why I've allowed a human servant into my private chambers. Why I'm breaking traditions that have stood for centuries." "Human," Alara repeated, her mouth dry. "As opposed to..." His eyes gleamed amber in the early light. "You're a smart woman, Alara. You've already figured it out." She had. Somewhere between the impossible healing and the howls and the way he moved like liquid shadow, she'd pieced it together. But hearing it confirmed was different. Terrifying. World-shattering. "You're werewolves," she whispered. "Shifters," he corrected. "And yes, every person in this court, every guard, every servant except you, we're all pack." The implications crashed over her. She'd been living among them for 3 weeks, serving them food, washing their dishes, invisible in her servitude. And all along, they'd known. They'd smelled her humanity, probably heard her racing heartbeat whenever she lied about her past. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" "Because humans don't come here. Ever." His hand lifted, hovering near her cheek but not quite touching. "This territory has been closed to outsiders for 50 years. You shouldn't have been hired. The kitchen master should have turned you away at the gates. But he didn't. No, he didn't." Darius's eyes searched hers, which means either he's incredibly incompetent or someone wanted you here. The thought sent ice through her veins. "That's impossible. No one knows where I am. I made sure." "Alara." His voice dropped lower, gentler. "In a court of wolves, there are no secrets. We can hear lies in your heartbeat, smell fear in your sweat, track you through the forest from miles away. If someone wanted to find you, they could. She thought of the villagers who'd chased her out, of the magistrate who'd tried to have her arrested for witchcraft after she'd saved 3 children from fever using her grandmother's herbs, of the man she'd almost married before he'd turned on her like all the rest. "I need to leave," she said. "If I'm putting you in danger, you're not." He said it with such certainty. "I am the danger here, and anyone who wants to harm you will have to go through me first." The promise in his words made her chest tight. "You barely know me. I know you stayed when anyone else would have run. I know you held a traumatized child's hand all night instead of seeking your own comfort. I know you stood up to me when my entire court was terrified." His fingers finally made contact, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with devastating gentleness. "I know you're brave and kind and hiding from something that hurt you badly. Stop," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she meant stop touching her or stop seeing her so clearly. "I can't." The confession seemed to surprise him as much as her. "Believe me, I've tried. From the moment you stepped forward in that throne room, something in me recognized you." Before Alara could process that, before she could examine the way her own body seemed to lean toward him despite every logical objection, the door burst open. A woman strode in, tall and elegant with silver blonde hair and eyes like chips of ice. She took in the scene, Darius and Alara standing close, Mira sleeping in the royal bed, and her lip curled. "So it's true," she said. "The mighty Alpha King has lost his mind over a human." Darius moved in front of Alara so fast she barely saw it. His entire demeanor changed, the gentleness evaporating into pure dominance. "Counselor Vera, you forget yourself." "I forget nothing." Vera's gaze slid past him to Alara. "That's more than can be said for you. The pack is gathering, Darius. They want answers. They want to know why you've brought prey into our den." The word prey hung in the air like a threat. Alara's survival instincts screamed at her to run, but Darius's presence in front of her felt like a wall, immovable and protective. "She is under my protection," Darius said, each word precise and sharp. "As is the child. That makes them pack, regardless of their blood." Vera laughed, the sound brittle. "You can't just declare humans pack. That's not how this works. There are laws, traditions, which I can change." His voice dropped to something barely human, resonant with power that made the windows rattle. "Or have you forgotten who holds the crown?" For the first time, Vera's confidence wavered. She took a step back, her head tilting in a gesture that looked almost like submission. "Almost. The others won't be as easily cowed," she said. "Especially not Marcus. He's already calling for a challenge." Alara felt Darius, tense. "Let him call. I've beaten him before." "That was before you started making decisions with your—" Vera's eyes flicked to Alara again. "Heart instead of your head." "Get out!" Darius growled. Actually growled, the sound rumbling from deep in his chest. "Tell the council I'll address them within the hour. And Vera? If I hear you've spread one word about what you saw here, if you've put her in danger with your gossiping tongue, you'll find out exactly how far my mercy extends." Vera's face went pale. She bowed, stiffly, unwillingly, and left, closing the door with more force than necessary. The silence she left behind felt heavy, dangerous. "What's a challenge?" Alara asked quietly. Darius turned to her, and the conflict in his expression broke her heart. A fight. For dominance. For the right to lead the pack. He paused. Sometimes to the death. "Because of me. Because of him." Darius's hands clenched into fists. "Marcus has wanted my position for years. He's just been waiting for an excuse. You, Mira, your convenient reasons. But this was always coming. Alara moved toward him without thinking, placing her hand on his arm. His skin was burning hot through the fabric. Then let me go. Take away his excuse. No. The word was absolute. Final. He covered her hand with his, holding her there. Even if I wanted to, which I don't, it's too late. You've been seen with me. You're marked as mine in their eyes. If I cast you out now, if I withdraw my protection, they'll tear you apart just to prove a point. Marked as yours, she repeated, her pulse jumping. His eyes met hers, and there was hunger there. Not the predatory kind she'd expect from a wolf. Something deeper, more dangerous. Yes, he said simply. Mine. And I protect what's mine. From the bed, Mira stirred, sitting up with wide eyes. Alpha. Why are the others angry? Darius released Alara and went to the child, kneeling beside the bed. Because sometimes, little one, doing the right thing makes people uncomfortable. He stroked her hair. But I need you to be brave for me today. Can you do that? Mira nodded solemnly, then looked past him to Alara. Is the nice lady staying? Darius glanced back at Alara, a question in his eyes. Despite everything, the danger, the impossibility, the complete insanity of the situation, Alara found herself nodding. Yes, she said, meeting his gaze. I'm staying. Something fierce and possessive flashed across Darius's face. When he smiled, Alara saw the hint of fangs. Good, he said, because I wasn't letting you leave anyway. Outside, the howling started again, closer now, coming for them, and Alara realized that whatever happened next would change everything. Chapter 4. Blood and Belonging. The Great Hall looked different in daylight. Yesterday, it had been imposing but elegant. Today, with 40 pairs of inhuman eyes trained on her, it felt like a gladiatorial arena. Alara stood beside Darius's throne, Mira's small hand clutched in hers. The child pressed against her leg, trembling. Alara wanted to do the same, find somewhere to hide from the weight of all that predatory attention. But she forced herself to stand straight, to meet their stares without flinching. If she showed fear, she'd be prey. Darius had explained that much before they'd descended from his chambers. In a wolf pack, weakness is death, he'd said, helping her into a dress his servants had brought. Dark blue silk that marked her as under royal protection. His fingers had lingered on her shoulders as he'd adjusted the fabric. You don't have to be strong. You just have to look it. Now, watching the assembled council circle like sharks sensing blood, Alara understood what he'd meant. Darius sat on his throne, every inch the Alpha King. Gone was the gentle man who'd held a child's hand through the night. This was the predator who'd killed an entire pack of rogues, who commanded with absolute authority. His presence filled the room, made the air thick with dominance. But his hand rested on the arm of his throne closest to her, fingers close enough that she could touch them if she dared. You've called this assembly, Darius said, his voice carrying effortlessly. Speak. A man stepped forward, massive, scarred, with eyes like molten gold. Marcus. Even without introduction, Alara knew him. He moved with the confidence of someone who'd never lost a fight. You returned from a rogue hunt with 2 humans, Marcus said. Not prisoners, not corpses, but under your protection. You house them in your personal chambers. You stand before the pack with one at your side. His lip curled. Explain this madness, Darius. The use of his name without title was deliberate disrespect. Several council members hissed, but Darius remained perfectly still. I brought back a child who survived a massacre, Darius said evenly, and a healer who saved her life. Where is the madness in protecting the innocent? The innocent? Vera stepped forward, her silver blonde hair gleaming. We know nothing about this woman. She appears at our gates 3 weeks ago with forged papers and a false name. Yes, we checked, she added, when Alara's heart stuttered. The real Alara Thorne died 2 years ago in the southern provinces. Ice flooded Alara's veins. She'd been so careful, paid so much for those documents. But of course they'd checked. They were wolves. They could probably smell the lies on the paper. What's your real name? Marcus demanded, stalking closer. What are you running from? Alara's mouth went dry. Beside her, Mira whimpered. She felt the weight of every eye in the room, felt the trap closing around her. One wrong word, and they'd tear her apart, protection or not. Her name, Darius said, his voice dropping to something dangerous, is her own business. As is her past. I don't require my pack to justify their histories to challengers. She's not pack, Marcus snarled. She's human. She doesn't belong here. I decide who belongs. Darius stood, and the room seemed to shrink around him. Alara felt power roll off him in waves, something primal that made her hindbrain scream. I am Alpha. My word is law. Or have you forgotten that in your ambition? Marcus bared his teeth, longer than they should be, sharper. Perhaps it's time for a new Alpha, one who remembers that we are wolves, not nursemaids to human strays. The room erupted. Some council members shouted support for Marcus, others for Darius. The noise was deafening, aggressive, and Alara felt Mira start to cry. Without thinking, she scooped the child into her arms, backing toward the throne. A hand caught her wrist, Darius, pulling her closer. Not quite behind him, but near enough that his body was a barrier between her and the pack. Enough! His roar silenced them all. The windows rattled. The very stones seemed to vibrate with his authority. You want a challenge, Marcus? Name the terms. Trial by combat, Marcus said immediately. For the right to rule. Winner takes all. No! The word burst from Alara before she could stop it. Every head turned toward her. The silence was crushing. She'd just spoken out of turn in a pack gathering, interrupted an Alpha's challenge. Even she knew that was unforgivable. But Darius's fingers tightened around her wrist, not in anger, in something like gratitude. The human speaks for her Alpha, Vera said mockingly. How touching. She speaks out of compassion, Darius corrected, his eyes never leaving Marcus. A quality some of you have forgotten. He turned to Alara, and his expression softened just slightly. But this is pack law, little one. It cannot be avoided. He'll kill you, Alara whispered, though she didn't know why she was so certain. Didn't know why the thought of Darius bleeding out on cold stone made her want to scream. He'll try. Darius released her wrist, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. The gesture was achingly gentle, intimate in a way that made the entire room hold its breath. But I've survived worse. When? Marcus demanded. Tomorrow night, Darius said, still looking at Alara. Under the full moon, traditional rules, shifted form, to first submission or death. Marcus grinned, savage and cruel. To death, then. I accept. The council erupted again, but Alara barely heard them. All she could focus on was Darius's thumb brushing across her cheekbone, his amber eyes searching hers. You could have thrown me out, she said quietly. Ended this before it started. I could have, he agreed. But then I'd be the kind of Alpha who abandons those under his protection to save his own skin. That's not who I am. That's not who I'll ever be. Even if it costs you everything? His smile was small, sad. Some things are worth the cost. Before she could respond, he turned back to the pack, dismissing them with a wave. They filed out slowly, many casting hostile glances at Alara. Marcus was the last to leave, his parting look a promise of violence. When they were finally alone, just Darius, Alara, and Mira in the vast hall, Alara's knees buckled. Darius caught her, pulling her against his chest. She could hear his heartbeat, strong and steady, and felt the rumble of his voice when he spoke. "I'm sorry," he said into her hair. "I've put you in impossible danger." "You didn't do anything," Alara said, her voice muffled against his shirt. "I chose to stay. I chose to help Mira. I chose—" She pulled back to look at him. "I chose you." Something fierce and possessive flashed across his face. "You don't know what you're saying." "Don't I?" She reached up, her palm against his jaw. "You're not human, and neither is anyone else here. You turn into wolves, into something powerful and dangerous. Your world has rules I don't understand, and threats I can't fight. I should be terrified. But you're not." "Oh, I'm terrified," she admitted. "But not of you. Never of you." Darius closed his eyes, leaning into her touch like a man starved for gentleness. "You should be. You should fear me most of all." "Why?" He opened his eyes and they glowed with that inner amber light. "Because the moment you stepped into that throne room, something in me recognized you, claimed you, and I've been fighting it ever since." Alara's breath caught. Fighting what? The bond. The words seemed dragged from him. "Wolves mate for life, Alara. When we find our mate, it's not a choice. It's destiny. And every instinct I have is screaming that you're mine." The confession hung between them, heavy with implication. Alara knew she should pull away, should process this logically. But logic had abandoned her the moment she'd met his eyes in that throne room. "What if I don't want you to fight it?" she whispered. Darius made a sound low in his throat, half growl, half groan. "Don't say that. Don't offer me something I can't refuse." "Then don't refuse it." "Alara, no." She pressed her fingers to his lips. "You said wolves mate, for life. But what about humans? What about choice?" She held his gaze. "I choose this. I choose you. Whatever that means, whatever it costs. I choose you." For a moment, Darius just stared at her, something like wonder on his face. Then he pulled her close, his forehead against hers, breathing her in like she was oxygen and he was drowning. "Tomorrow night," he said roughly, "I'm going to fight for the right to keep you, to protect you, to have you in my life." "Then win," Alara said simply, "because I'm not going anywhere." Against her leg, Mira tugged at her dress. "Does this mean you're staying forever?" Alara looked down at the little girl, then back at Darius, at the man who'd chosen honor over safety, who'd protected a child and a stranger without hesitation, who was willing to fight to the death for the right to keep them safe. "Yes," she said, feeling the truth of it settle into her bones. "Forever." Darius smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. But outside, storm, clouds gathered, and somewhere in the forest, Marcus was preparing to take everything Darius had claimed as his own. Chapter 5. Scars. We carry. Alara couldn't sleep. She lay in the guest chamber adjacent to Darius's rooms, a space he'd insisted she take after the council meeting, staring at the ceiling while Mira slumbered peacefully beside her. The child had refused to be separated from her, clinging like a burr until Darius had simply carried them both to the room and ordered servants to bring a larger bed. Through the wall, she could hear him pacing, back and forth, endless and restless. She wondered if he was preparing for the fight, or if, like her, he was replaying the moment when everything had changed between them. "I choose you." The words had felt right when she'd said them. They still did. But now, in the dark, doubt crept in. What did she really know about Darius Shadowmere? that he was a king, a werewolf, that he moved like violence personified, but held a traumatized child with infinite gentleness, that his eyes saw through every wall she'd built around herself, that she felt safer with him than she'd felt anywhere in years. The pacing stopped. A moment later, there was a soft knock at her door. Alara slipped from the bed carefully, checking that Mira was still asleep before padding to the door. She opened it to find Darius standing there in dark pants and an unbuttoned shirt, his hair disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it. He looked exhausted and wired all at once. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I can hear your heartbeat through the wall. You're not sleeping. Neither are you. I never sleep well before a challenge." His eyes searched her face. "But that's not why I came. I needed to see you, to make sure you were real." The vulnerability in his voice made her chest ache. She stepped back, gesturing him inside. He hesitated, then entered, moving to the window to stare out at the forest bathed in moonlight. "Tell me about your pack," Alara said, settling into the chair near the hearth. "About how this works." Darius was quiet for a long moment. "My father was alpha before me," he finally said. "Strong, ruthless, respected. He ruled through fear and force. The pack prospered, but they didn't love him." His jaw tightened. "When I challenged him for leadership, half the pack expected me to follow his example. The other half hoped I'd be different. And which half was right? I don't know." He turned to face her. "I've tried to lead with both strength and mercy, to protect without dominating, to honor our traditions while adapting to a changing world." He ran a hand through his hair. "But there are those like Marcus who think mercy is weakness, who believe humans are inferior and our borders should be closed to everyone." "He's not wrong about me being a risk," Alara said softly. "I brought danger to your door the moment I arrived. You brought light." Darius moved closer, kneeling before her chair, so they were eye level. "Do you know what it's like, Alara, to be surrounded by people who follow you out of duty but never truly see you? To be alpha, to be king, to be the strongest and most feared, and still be completely alone?" Her throat tightened. "Yes, I do." His eyes widened slightly. "Tell me, please. I need to understand what you're running from." Alara looked away, old shame rising like bile. She'd never told anyone the full story. Not the kitchen master, not the few servants who'd tried to befriend her. But Darius had offered her his truth. Maybe it was time to offer hers. "My grandmother raised me," she began. "After my parents died. She was a healer, the best in our province. She taught me everything. Herbs, anatomy, how to set bones and deliver babies and fight infection." The memories were bittersweet. People came from miles around for her help. They respected her, trusted her. Until they didn't, Darius said quietly. Until the magistrate's son got sick. A fever that wouldn't break. Alara's hands clenched in her lap. "My grandmother worked for days. She used every remedy she knew. But he died anyway." Her voice cracked. "They said she'd cursed him, that our healing was witchcraft, that we'd sold our souls for our knowledge. They burned her at the stake while I hid in the woods." Darius made a sound of pure rage, his hands fisting against his thighs. "They murdered her for trying to save a life? Fear makes people cruel." Alara wiped at her eyes angrily. "I tried to stay, to continue her work, but the magistrate wanted revenge. He came for me with soldiers and torches. Said I was a witch like my grandmother, that I'd corrupted his daughter, my best friend, with dark magic." She laughed bitterly. "All I'd done was teach her to read." "So you ran?" "I ran. I bought forged papers with the last of my grandmother's savings. I traveled north, as far as I could get from that place. And when I reached Silvercrest, I finally found somewhere they'd never find me. She met his eyes. But I brought my danger with me. And now you're going to die because of it. I'm not going to die. Darius reached up, cupping her face in both hands. And even if I were, protecting you would be worth it. Do you understand that? What they did to you, to your grandmother, it was evil, ignorant and cruel and evil. You survived it. You stayed kind and compassionate despite it. That's not weakness, Alara. That's strength. I'm not strong. I'm a coward who hid while they killed her. You were a child, he said fiercely. A child who lived so that her grandmother's knowledge wouldn't die. So that her sacrifice meant something. His thumbs brushed away her tears. You honor her every time you help someone. Every bandage you wrap. Every fever you break. Every frightened child you comfort. That's her legacy. That's your strength. Alara closed her eyes, letting his words sink into the wounded places inside her. No one had ever said anything like that to her. No one had ever made her feel like surviving was something to be proud of rather than ashamed. Why? She whispered. Why do you care so much? I told you. The bond. No. She opened her eyes, holding his gaze. Before you felt the bond, in that throne room, when you could have ignored me. Why did you let me help? Darius was quiet for a long moment. Because you didn't hesitate, he said finally. Everyone else saw a king covered in blood and a mystery he carried. You saw a child who needed help and offered yours without question. You looked at me, at what I am, and you weren't afraid. You were present, real. His voice dropped. I've been surrounded by wolves my entire life. Pack politics, dominance games, everyone wanting something from me. But you just helped. Because it was right. That's all I've ever wanted to do, Alara admitted. Help people. Heal them. My grandmother used to say that healing wasn't about magic or power. It was about paying attention. About seeing what someone needs and providing it. Then you saw what I needed before I did. Darius's forehead touched hers. Someone who chose me. Not the alpha, not the king. Just me. They stayed like that, breathing together in the quiet. Alara felt something shift between them, settling into place like a lock finding its key. This wasn't just attraction or circumstantial bonding. This was recognition. Two broken people who'd survived different horrors, finding unexpected wholeness in each other. Tomorrow night, Alara said softly, when you fight, what will it be like? Brutal. Bloody. He didn't sugarcoat it. We'll shift into our wolf forms. Marcus is powerful, one of the strongest in the pack. He'll fight with everything he has. Will I be able to watch? The entire pack will watch. It's tradition. He pulled back enough to see her face. But Alara, if it's too much, I'll be there. Her voice was steady. You're fighting for me. The least I can do is witness it. Something fierce and proud crossed his features. You continue to surprise me. Good. She managed a small smile. Someone should keep the Alpha King on his toes. He laughed, the sound startling them both. When was the last time she'd heard genuine laughter in this place? When was the last time she'd felt light enough to attempt humor? Stay with me tonight, Darius said suddenly. I don't mean... He seemed flustered, which was adorable on a man who commanded armies. Just stay. Talk to me. Help me remember what I'm fighting for. Alara glanced at the bed where Mira slept, then back at Darius. She has nightmares if she wakes alone. Bring her. He stood, offering his hand. My chambers are large enough. We'll move her carefully. It was insane. It was improper. It would fuel every rumor Vera was already spreading. But Alara took his hand anyway, letting him pull her to her feet. Together, they carefully lifted the sleeping child, carrying her through the connecting door into Darius's room. They settled Mira in his massive bed, surrounding her with pillows. Then Darius led Alara to the sitting area by his hearth, where embers still glowed. He added wood, coaxing the fire back to life, and they sat together on the thick rug before it. "Tell me something good," Darius said, his shoulder touching hers. "Something from before. A happy memory." Alara thought for a moment. "My grandmother's garden. She had this patch of lavender that bloomed every summer. She'd make sachets for the village children, tell them it would keep nightmares away." She smiled at the memory. "I used to fall asleep in that garden, surrounded by purple flowers and the sound of bees." "That sounds perfect." "It was. What about you? Do you have happy memories?" "Fewer than I'd like." He stared into the fire. "But there was a stream near the old pack house where I grew up. I'd sneak away as a child, before the responsibilities set in, just sit by the water and listen. It was the only place I felt free." They talked through the night, trading stories like precious gifts. Alara learned that Darius loved thunderstorms and hated politics, that he'd taught himself to read as a child because his father thought education made wolves soft, that he'd once rescued a rabbit from a trap and nursed it back to health, only to have his father kill it to teach him a lesson about weakness. In turn, she told him about her first successful delivery, about the elderly woman who'd taught her to knit, about the strange peace she'd found in repetitive work in his kitchens. As dawn painted the sky pink and gold, Alara realized she'd learned more about Darius in one night than she'd learned about anyone in years, and he'd done the same with her. When the sun finally broke the horizon, Darius took her hand, threading their fingers together. "Whatever happens tonight," he said quietly, "I want you to know. These hours with you have been the most peaceful of my life." Alara squeezed his hand, her heart full and breaking simultaneously. "Then win," she whispered. "Win, and we'll have all the peaceful hours you want." He brought her knuckles to his lips, his eyes holding hers with devastating intensity. "For you," he promised, "I'll tear the world apart." Chapter 6. The calm before teeth. The day of the challenge crawled by with agonizing slowness. Alara spent the morning with Mira, trying to keep the child distracted while servants prepared the ceremonial grounds. But even Mira, young as she was, could sense the tension that gripped the entire palace. The air felt thick, charged like the moment before lightning strikes. Darius had disappeared after breakfast, summoned by pack rituals Alara wasn't allowed to witness. The separation felt wrong, like losing a limb she hadn't known she needed. Every instinct screamed at her to find him, to make sure he was all right. But the guards at the corridor entrance made it clear the Alpha must prepare alone. "It's tradition," an older servant named Margot explained, her tone sympathetic as she brought lunch. "Before a challenge, the Alpha undergoes purification, meditation. He must face the fight with a clear mind and spirit." "And if his mind isn't clear?" Alara asked, thinking of how little sleep they'd gotten. Margot's smile was sad. "Then he fights anyway, child. Such is the burden of leadership." By mid-afternoon, Alara couldn't stand the confinement any longer. She left Mira with Margot and slipped through the palace corridors, heading for the one place she thought might offer perspective, the palace library. She found it empty, vast shelves stretching toward vaulted ceilings. The scent of old paper and leather wrapped around her like a familiar embrace. She'd always found comfort in libraries, in the accumulated wisdom of generations. Surely somewhere in these thousands of volumes, There was information about pack challenges, about how to survive in a world of wolves. Looking for an instruction manual? Alara spun to find Vera emerging from between the shelves, her silver blonde hair gleaming in the filtered sunlight. The woman moved with predatory grace, circling Alara like she was prey. Just trying to understand, Alara said, keeping her voice steady. Understand what? How you've managed to bewitch our king. Vera's smile was sharp. I'll admit, you're more clever than you look. Playing the helpless damsel, the compassionate healer. It's quite the performance. It's not a performance. I genuinely care about... About him? Vera laughed. Please, you've known him for barely 2 days. You can't possibly understand what you're risking with this... infatuation. Alara lifted her chin. Then explain it to me. Vera's eyes narrowed, surprised by the challenge. After a moment, she gestured to the reading area, taking a seat. Alara joined her warily, perching on the edge of a chair. Darius Shadowmere is not just a king, Vera began. He is the alpha of the most powerful pack in the Northern Territories. For 300 years, his bloodline has held this position through strength, cunning, and ruthlessness. His father ruled with an iron fist. His grandfather before him was known as the Butcher of the Blood Moon. They were monsters, Alara, but they were effective monsters. Darius isn't like them. No, he isn't. Vera's expression was unreadable. And that's precisely the problem. He believes in mercy, in integration, in protecting the weak. Noble ideals, certainly, but they've made him vulnerable. Marcus sees that vulnerability. So do others. You're saying his kindness is a weakness? I'm saying his kindness has given his enemies openings. Vera leaned forward. Do you know why rogues attacked that village? Because word has spread that our alpha is soft, that he hesitates, that he values human life. She paused. Because of you, he's fighting a challenge he might lose. If Marcus wins, you know what happens to humans under his rule? Alara's stomach churned. What? They're banned, hunted, killed on sight within our borders. Vera's voice dropped. And that little girl sleeping in the royal chambers, the one you've bonded with, she'll be the first to go. A message to anyone who would question Marcus's authority. No. Alara's voice shook. Darius won't let that happen. Darius might be dead. Vera's bluntness was brutal. And even if he wins tonight, there will be others. More challenges, more threats. Being near him, caring for him, it puts a target on your back. On Mira's back. Is your romantic fantasy worth that child's life? The words hit like physical blows. Alara thought of Mira's nightmares, her small hand clutching hers, the way she'd started to smile again. Could she truly protect the child if her presence made everything worse? Why are you telling me this? Alara asked quietly. Vera stood, moving to the window. Because despite what you think, I don't want Darius to lose. He's a good king, even if his methods frustrate me. But he's distracted by you. Divided. Tonight, he needs to be the alpha, the predator, the warrior. Not the man who holds children and whispers promises to humans. You want me to leave. I want you to give him the best chance to survive. Vera turned, and for the first time, Alara saw genuine concern in her eyes. If you love him, even a little, you'll make sure his head is clear when he steps into that ring. Before Alara could respond, the library door burst open. A young guard stood there, breathless. Counselor Vera, Miss Alara, the Alpha requests your presence. Both of you. Immediately. They found Darius in the ceremonial chamber, a circular room lined with ancient weapons and pack banners. He'd been cleaned and dressed in traditional fighting clothes, simple leather pants, his chest bare except for ceremonial markings painted in dark ink. He looked every inch the warrior king, beautiful and terrifying all at once. But when his eyes found Alara, they softened. "You asked to see us, my lord?" Vera said formally. "I wanted witnesses," Darius said, "for what I'm about to declare." He moved to a pedestal in the center of the room, lifting something from it. A silver collar embedded with moonstone. "This is the mate bond collar. It hasn't been used in this pack for 50 years. Alara's breath caught. She'd read about these in her grandmother's books. Ancient symbols of claim and protection among wolf packs. When an alpha placed the collar, it was a binding declaration. The person wearing it became untouchable, protected by every law of pack hierarchy. "You can't be serious," Vera breathed. "Darius, think about what you're doing." "I have thought." His voice was absolute. "If I fall tonight, Marcus will take power. He'll kill or exile every human in this territory, including Alara and Mira. But if I place this collar before the fight, they become pack. Truly and irrevocably. Even Marcus can't touch them without breaking sacred law." "He'll break it," Vera warned. "The moment you're gone, then he'll face the judgment of every allied pack in the north." Darius's eyes glowed amber. "I've already sent word. If anything happens to those under my protection, the other alphas will consider it an act of war." Vera looked stunned. "You'd start a war? Over a human?" "I'd burn the world." Darius's gaze never left Alara. "Now leave us. Both of you have your answer." Vera hesitated, then bowed stiffly and left. The door closed, leaving Alara alone with Darius and the weight of what he was offering. "You don't have to do this," Alara said, though her voice shook. "Vera's right. I'm dividing your focus, making you vulnerable." "Vera is afraid," Darius interrupted, crossing to her. "She's afraid of change, afraid of losing control. But fear is not wisdom." He held up the collar. "This is my choice, Alara. The same way staying was yours." "But what if—" He pressed a finger to her lips. "No. No more what ifs. I've lived my entire life making decisions based on strategy and politics. This is the first time I'm choosing something just because it's what I want." His hand cupped her face. "You. I want you. I want to know that no matter what happens tonight, you and Mira will be safe. That my pack, my people, will honor my wishes even if I'm not here to enforce them." Tears burned Alara's eyes. "You're supposed to win. You promised." "I plan to." He smiled, fierce and certain. "But I'm also a king. I prepare for every outcome." He held the collar between them. "Will you wear this? Will you accept my protection, my claim, my bond?" Alara looked at the silver collar, at the moonstone that caught the light like captured starlight. This was more than protection. It was a promise, a commitment, a declaration to his entire world that she belonged to him and he to her. Every logical part of her brain screamed that it was too fast, too much, too dangerous. But her heart, her battered, cautious heart, knew the truth. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll wear it." Darius's expression transformed, relief and joy and fierce possessiveness flooding his features. He moved behind her, gathering her hair gently. She felt the cool metal against her throat, heard the soft click as it fastened. The collar settled against her skin like it had been made for her, not heavy or restrictive, but present. A constant reminder of the bond they'd chosen. When Darius turned her to face him, his eyes were blazing. "Mine," he said softly, reverently. "My mate, my heart, my choice." "Yours," Alara agreed, reaching up to trace the ceremonial markings on his chest. "And you're mine, so you'd better come back to me." He caught her hand, pressing it over his heart. I'll come back. I'll fight like hell, and I'll come back, and then—" His voice dropped, intimate and full of promise. "Then we'll have all the time in the world to figure out what forever looks like." "Forever sounds good," Alara managed, though tears were sliding down her cheeks. Darius kissed her forehead, her cheeks, tasting her tears. When he finally found her lips, the kiss was gentle but consuming, full of everything they hadn't said and everything they would. It tasted like promises and hope, and the terrifying beauty of choosing each other despite impossible odds. When they finally pulled apart, the sun was setting, painting the room in shades of blood and gold. "It's time," Darius said quietly. "The pack will be gathering." Alara nodded, her hand going to the collar at her throat. She could feel its weight now, solid and real. "Then let's give them something to remember," she said, meeting his eyes with all the courage she could muster. Darius smiled, proud and fierce, and offered her his arm. Together they walked toward the battle that would decide everything. Chapter 7. Moon's Witness. The ceremonial grounds were an ancient clearing deep in the Won forest, ringed by towering pines that seemed to lean inward, watching. Torches burned at intervals, casting dancing shadows, and the full moon hung heavy and silver above it all. The entire pack had gathered, hundreds of them, forming a living circle around the fighting pit. Their eyes glowed in the darkness, dozens of pairs of amber and gold and green, all fixed on the center where Darius and Marcus would clash. Alara's arrival sent a ripple through the crowd. She felt their stares on the collar at her throat, heard the whispers spread like wildfire. The human wearing the mate bond, the human who had claimed their alpha's heart. Some faces showed shock, others, anger. A few, very few, held something that might have been approval. Darius led her to a raised platform at the edge of the circle, where Mira waited with Margot. The moment the child saw Alara, she broke free and ran to her, wrapping small arms around her waist. "You're glowing," Mira whispered, touching the collar with odd fingers. "It's so pretty." "It means I'm protected," Alara said, kneeling to the child's level. "We both are. No matter what happens tonight, we're safe. Do you understand?" Mira nodded, though her blue eyes were frightened. "The Alpha has to fight now." "Yes." Alara pulled her close. "But he's strong. He'll be all right." She said it with more confidence than she felt. Looking at Marcus across the circle, massive, battle-scarred, radiating aggression, she couldn't imagine how anyone could stand against him. Then Darius moved to the center of the pit, and she understood. He walked with absolute authority, every movement precise and controlled. When he turned to face the pack, the torchlight caught the ceremonial markings on his chest, made his eyes glow like captured fire. He looked ancient and eternal, like something carved from mythology. "This challenge was issued under pack law," Darius announced, his voice carrying effortlessly. "Marcus of the Stone Ridge line seeks to claim leadership through trial by combat. Do you maintain your challenge?" Marcus stepped into the circle, cracking his knuckles. "I do. And when I win, my first act as Alpha will be to cleanse this pack of human weakness." The crowd erupted, some cheering, others protesting. Darius let the noise wash over him, unmoved. "Then we fight under the old laws," Darius said. "Shifted form. To submission or death. May the moon judge us fairly." He looked directly at Alara then, and the intensity in his gaze stole her breath. "Trust me," his eyes seemed to say. "Have faith." Then he began to change. Alara had read about shifting in her grandmother's books, had heard stories whispered around fires. But nothing had prepared her for the reality. Darius's body rippled like water. bones restructuring with sounds that should have been agonizing. Dark fur erupted across his skin as he dropped to all fours, his face elongating into a muzzle filled with gleaming fangs. Within seconds, where a man had stood, there was now a wolf the size of a small horse, black as midnight with those same amber eyes, radiating power that made the air shimmer. Marcus shifted too, transforming into a gray wolf nearly as large, his scarred muzzle twisted in a snarl. The two alphas circled each other, and the clearing went utterly silent. Then Marcus lunged. The impact was brutal. They collided in a tangle of fur and teeth, snarling and snapping. Marcus went for Darius's throat, but Darius twisted away, his jaws closing on Marcus's shoulder. Blood sprayed black in the moonlight. Alara's hand flew to her mouth. Mira pressed against her side. She wanted to look away, to shield the child from the violence. But she'd promised to witness this. Promised to be strong. The wolves broke apart, circling again. Marcus was favoring his wounded shoulder, but his eyes burned with rage. He feinted left, then attacked right, catching Darius across the ribs with vicious claws. Darius yelped but retaliated immediately, his powerful jaws clamping onto Marcus's leg. They rolled across the clearing, a blur of black and gray, each trying to pin the other. The sound was terrible. Growls that shook the earth, the snap of teeth, the wet sound of claws tearing flesh. Marcus managed to throw Darius off, and for a moment, both wolves stood panting, bleeding. Then Marcus did something unexpected. He shifted partially, a grotesque hybrid of man and wolf, standing upright with a wolf's head and claws, but human-like arms for greater reach and strength. It was against the rules, but before anyone could object, he slashed at Darius with elongated claws. Darius barely dodged, the claws scoring deep lines across his side. He shifted too, matching Marcus's hybrid form. Now they fought as something between man and beast, trading blows that would have killed normal creatures. "That's cheating," Mira whimpered. "In a challenge," Margot said quietly beside them. "There are no rules once blood is drawn. Only survival." Alara's fingers gripped the collar at her throat, her knuckles white. Every blow Marcus landed sent pain lancing through her own chest. Some distant part of her mind understood what this meant. The mate bond wasn't just ceremonial. It was real, visceral, connecting her to Darius in ways she couldn't comprehend. When Marcus's claws raked across Darius's chest, Alara felt the echo of it, gasped with the phantom pain. Mira looked up at her with wide eyes. "You feel it too," the child whispered. "The bond." "What?" "When it hurts him, you feel it." Mira touched the collar gently. "My mama said that's what happens when souls recognize each other. They share everything. Even pain." Alara stared at the child, then back at the fight. Was it possible? Could a bond form this quickly, this deeply? In the pit, Marcus had Darius pinned, his hybrid jaws closing around Darius's throat. The crowd roared, half in triumph, half in horror. Alara felt pressure at her own throat, felt the breath being squeezed from her lungs. No, 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 no. She didn't realize she'd moved until she was at the edge of the pit, Mira's hand in hers. The words tore from her throat without thought, ancient and instinctive. "Darius, Alpha, get up." It shouldn't have mattered. She was human, powerless, nothing in this world of predators. But the moment his name left her lips, Darius's eyes snapped open, not amber now, but burning gold. He moved with impossible speed, twisting in Marcus's grip and sinking his fangs into the other wolf's throat. Marcus howled, releasing him, stumbling back. Blood poured from the wound, dark and thick. Darius shifted fully back to wolf form, massive and terrifying. He didn't give Marcus a chance to recover, launching himself at his opponent with primal fury. They crashed together again, but this time, Darius was relentless. He drove Marcus back, until the gray wolf's hindquarters hit the edge of the pit. With one final, brutal lunge, Darius clamped his jaws around Marcus's throat and held. The clearing went deathly quiet. Marcus struggled for a moment, then went still. Submission. He'd lost. But Darius didn't release him. His jaws tightened, and Alara could see the decision warring in those golden eyes. To kill or to spare. To show mercy or to eliminate a threat permanently. Darius. Alara's voice carried in the silence. Not a command, a reminder. You're better than this. The great black wolf's eyes found hers across the clearing. For a long moment, no one breathed. Then slowly, Darius opened his jaws and stepped back. Marcus collapsed, shifting back to human form, naked, bloodied, defeated. He kept his eyes on the ground, throat bared in ultimate submission. You are exiled, Darius said, his voice returning as he shifted back to human form himself, standing tall despite his wounds. You have until dawn to leave our territory. If you return, the sentence is death. Does anyone dispute my judgment? The silence was answer enough. Darius turned to face his pack, blood streaming from a dozen wounds, but standing victorious. I am Alpha. My word is law. Any who question my protection of those I choose will face the same challenge. His eyes swept the crowd. This human wears my collar. She is Pack. The child under my roof is Pack. They will be treated with the same respect you show me, or you will answer to me personally. Is this understood? A rumble of acknowledgement moved through the crowd. Not all of them looked happy, but none challenged him. Darius's eyes found Alara, and despite everything, the blood, the violence, the lingering threat, he smiled. Then his knees buckled. Alara was moving before conscious thought, racing into the pit, Mira close behind. She caught Darius as he fell, his weight nearly taking them both down. His skin was burning hot, his breathing ragged. I told you, he whispered, a pained smile on his lips. I told you I'd come back. You're an idiot, Alara said, tears streaming down her face, as her hands moved over his wounds, assessing the damage. A brave, wonderful, terrifying idiot. But you're idiot, he managed. Mine, she agreed, pressing her hand to the worst wound on his chest, trying to staunch the bleeding. Now shut up and let me save your life. Again. He laughed, then winced. Yes, my mate. The words, my mate, sent a shiver through her, through the bond, through whatever impossible magic connected them now. Around them, the pack began to close in, but not threateningly. Slowly, one by one, they knelt, acknowledging their alpha, acknowledging his choice, acknowledging her. Margot appeared with bandages and supplies. Other pack members, those who seemed less hostile, offered help. And as Alara worked to save the man she'd chosen, the man who'd fought for her right to exist in his world, she felt something shift. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She wasn't just hiding. She was home. Even if that home was a circle of torchlight in a clearing full of werewolves, with a wounded alpha in her arms and a traumatized child pressed against her side. It was still home, and she'd fight anyone who tried to take it from her. Chapter 8. Healing Wounds, Opening Hearts. The 3 days following the challenge passed in a blur of healing and adjustment. Darius's wounds, though severe, closed with supernatural speed. What would have killed a human left him merely weakened, confined to bed rest under Alara's watchful care. She'd moved into his chambers fully now. No pretense, no separate rooms. The pack had seen the collar, witnessed the fight, accepted her place at his side. Or most of them had, anyway. On the third morning, Alara woke to find Darius already awake beside her, propped on one elbow, watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You're staring again," she murmured, sleep still heavy in her voice. "I'm memorizing you," he said simply. "The way the morning light catches in your hair. That small scar on your shoulder. How you sleep curled toward me like you're afraid I'll disappear." Heat crept up her neck. "I'm not." "You are." His finger traced the curve of her cheek. "Every night, you reach for me. Even in sleep, you check that I'm still here." Alara wanted to deny it, but he was right. Some part of her remained terrified that this was temporary, that she'd wake to find herself back in the kitchens, that Darius and his impossible world had been nothing but a desperate dream. "Can you blame me?" she asked quietly. "A week ago, I was nobody. Now I'm wearing a mate collar and sleeping in a king's bed. It feels like something that could vanish at any moment." Darius shifted closer, his hand sliding to rest over her heart. "Do you feel that? Your heartbeat against my palm?" She nodded. "Now feel mine." He guided her hand to his chest, where his heart beat strong and steady beneath her fingertips. "This is real. You are real. What we have, it's not going anywhere. You can't promise that. There are still pack members who despise me. Vera barely speaks to me. And yesterday I heard servants whispering that I've cursed you, that the bond with a human will weaken your wolf. Alara." He cut off her spiral gently but firmly. "Do you know what happened after you fell asleep last night?" She shook her head. "I shifted. First time since the fight." "And do you know what I felt?" His eyes glowed faintly amber. "Stronger. Not weaker. The bond doesn't diminish me. It grounds me. For the first time in my life, my wolf and my human side are in perfect alignment. Because they both want the same thing. You." The confession made her throat tight. "The servants said, the servants are afraid of change. They'll adjust." His thumb brushed across her lower lip. "Besides, you've already started winning them over. Yesterday, when you helped the cook's daughter with her fever? When you sat with old Margaret and listened to her stories about the pack's history? They see your kindness, Alara, your genuine care. That's more powerful than any curse." Before she could respond, a small weight landed on the bed between them. Mira, still in her nightgown, burrowed under the covers with the practiced ease of a child who'd made this a morning ritual. "Are you two being mushy again?" she asked, her voice muffled by blankets. Darius laughed, pulling the child close. "Extremely mushy. Are you jealous?" "No." But Mira snuggled against him, seeking her own reassurance. I had the dream again. About the fire." Alara's heart clenched. She'd hoped the nightmares were fading, but trauma didn't heal on any predictable schedule. She moved closer, sandwiching Mira between them. "Do you want to talk about it?" "They were screaming," Mira whispered. "Mama and Papa and Lissa. And I couldn't help them. I was too small, too scared. I just hid and let them die." "You survived," Darius said gently, his large hand cradling the child's head. "That's what your parents wanted. That's why they hid you. But what if I forget them? What if I can't remember their faces anymore?" Alara met Darius's eyes over the child's head, seeing her own pain reflected there. She knew this fear intimately, the terror of losing the memories of those you'd loved, of your grief being all that remained. "Tell us about them," Alara said softly. "Tell us something that made them special." Mira was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Mama used to sing, every night before bed. And Papa would make these terrible jokes that only he thought were funny, but we'd laugh anyway because he'd laugh so hard at his own jokes. A small smile touched her lips. And Lissa, she was my big sister. She was teaching me to braid hair. I wasn't very good yet. I could teach you, Alara offered, if you'd like, so you can finish what Lissa started. Mira looked up at her with shining eyes. Really? Really? And maybe we could write down your memories. All the stories about your family, so you never forget. Like a book? Exactly like a book. Alara brushed hair from the child's face. Your family's story, preserved forever. Mira threw her arms around Alara's neck, holding tight. Over the child's shoulder, Alara saw Darius watching them with such profound tenderness that it made her chest ache. Thank you, he mouthed silently. A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Margot entered, bowing slightly. Forgive the intrusion, Your Majesty, but there are visitors at the gates. They claim to be from the southern provinces. They're asking for... She paused, uncomfortable. They're asking for a woman named Alara Thorne. The real Alara Thorne. The warmth drained from the room. Alara's blood turned to ice. Who are they? Darius demanded, already sitting up despite his injuries. A magistrate and his men. They say they're pursuing a criminal. A woman accused of witchcraft and murder. Margot's eyes flicked to Alara apologetically. They have documentation, warrants. They're demanding we turn her over for trial. Alara couldn't breathe. They'd found her. After all this time, all these miles, they'd tracked her down. The magistrate, the one whose son had died, who'd killed her grandmother, had come to finish what he'd started. Alara. Darius's hand on her arm was gentle but grounding. Look at me. She forced herself to meet his eyes. Did you murder anyone? He asked quietly. No, I swear, I never. Then they're not taking you. His voice hardened. Those are my gates, my territory, and you're under my protection. Human laws don't apply here. But if you refuse them, if you harbor a wanted criminal... Alara's mind raced through the implications. You could start a war. The southern provinces could demand your territories as recompense. The pack has already been through so much because of me. Stop. Darius cupped her face in both hands. Listen to me very carefully. I don't care about politics. I don't care about territories or provinces or human laws. I care about you. And I am not letting anyone take you from me. Darius, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. I'm protecting my mate. His eyes blazed. But if you want to hear their accusations, if you want to face them, I'll stand beside you. Whatever you choose, I'm with you. Alara looked at Mira, who was clinging to her nightgown with frightened eyes. Looked at Darius, wounded and fierce and utterly certain. Looked at Margot, who waited patiently despite the dangerous visitors at the gates. This was her new pack, her new life. But could she build it on a foundation of running and hiding? I want to face them, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. But not as a prisoner. Not as a criminal begging for mercy. Then how? Darius asked. Alara straightened, her hand going to the collar at her throat. As your mate. As pack. Under shifter law, not theirs. A slow, proud smile spread across Darius's face. That's my fierce little healer. He stood, calling for his servants. Dress us appropriately. We're receiving visitors, and someone fetch Counselor Vera. We'll need her knowledge of territorial law. As the room erupted into activity, Alara pulled Mira close. I need you to stay here with Margot. Can you be brave for me? Are they going to take you away? The child asked, her voice small. They're going to try. Alara kissed her forehead. But I have something they don't expect. What's that? Alara looked at Darius, who was already being helped into formal attire, his bearing regal despite his lingering injuries. I have a pack. I have family. I have people who believe in me. She met Mira's eyes. And that makes me stronger than any magistrate with his papers and prejudice. Mira hugged her tight. Come back to me. Always, Alara promised, though fear coiled in her stomach. 30 minutes later, Alara stood beside Darius in the throne room, dressed in deep purple silk that marked her status as mate to the Alpha King. The collar glinted at her throat. Her hair was braided in the traditional style of pack females. She looked every inch like she belonged here. But inside, she was still the terrified girl who'd fled her village with nothing but grief and desperation. The doors opened. A man strode in, gray-haired, hard-eyed, with the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. Behind him, 6 armed guards. The magistrate who'd killed her grandmother stopped when he saw her, his eyes narrowing. There you are. I've been looking for you for a very long time. Which? Alara lifted her chin, refusing to cower. Darius's hand found hers, squeezing gently. I'm afraid, Darius said, his voice silk over steel. You're addressing the mate of the Alpha King. You'll show proper respect, or you'll leave my territory in pieces. The magistrate's gaze slid to their joined hands, to the collar, to the assembled pack members who'd gathered to watch. Understanding and fury dawned on his face. You can't hide behind shifters forever, girl, he spat. Justice will find you. Justice. Alara's voice rang out, surprised by its own strength. You murdered my grandmother for trying to save your son. You turned an entire village against a healer who'd done nothing but help them. You want to talk to me about justice? Careful, the magistrate warned. Your confession of witchcraft is noted. There is no witchcraft, Alara said. Only medicine, only knowledge, only your ignorance masquerading as righteousness. The magistrate's face purpled. He turned to Darius. Are you truly going to harbor this criminal? Do you know what she's accused of? I know exactly what she's accused of, Darius said calmly. False charges born of superstition and scapegoating. In my territory, we don't execute people for possessing knowledge. We honor them. Then you're complicit. I'm Alpha. The words cracked like a whip. In this territory, my word is law, and I declare her innocent. Your warrants mean nothing here. Your jurisdiction ends at my borders. Take your persecution back to the South, Magistrate. Or stay, and face the consequences of threatening what's mine. The air in the throne room crackled with tension. Alara could see the magistrate calculating, weighing his options against the reality of dozens of shifters watching him with predatory interest. Finally, he stepped back. This isn't over. The provinces will hear of this. Your protection of criminals will have consequences. Let them hear, Darius said. Let everyone hear. I protect those who deserve it, and I don't cower to bullies with badges. The magistrate left, his guards trailing behind him, but not before casting one last venomous look at Alara. Your grandmother screamed, you know. At the end. She called for you, begged you to save her. The words were meant to wound, to break her. And they did, partially. Alara felt tears burn her eyes, felt old guilt rise like bile. But Darius moved in front of her, blocking the magistrate from view when he spoke. His voice carried the full weight of his alpha authority, made the windows rattle and the very stones tremble. Get out! The magistrate fled. When the doors closed behind him, Alara's knees gave out. Darius caught her, holding her as sobs tore from her throat. Grief and rage and relief all tangled together. I've got you, he murmured into her hair. I've got you, and I'm never letting go. And surrounded by pack, claimed by an alpha, wearing a collar that marked her as belonging, Alara finally let herself believe it might be true. Chapter 9. The bond completes. That night, Alara couldn't settle. She'd tucked Mira into bed in the adjoining room. The child now had her own space, but with doors that connected to theirs, always open. The confrontation with the magistrate had shaken the little girl, brought back memories of loss and violence. But holding her, singing the lullaby her own grandmother had once sung, Alara had felt something shift inside herself. She wasn't that helpless girl anymore. She had power here. Protection. Purpose. Now, standing on the balcony outside Darius's chambers, wrapped in a silk robe against the cool night air, she watched the moon trace silver paths through the forest. Somewhere out there, the magistrate was traveling back south, nursing his wounded pride. Would he return with more men? With armies? You're thinking too loud. She turned to find Darius in the doorway, bare-chested, his wounds now faded to pink scars that would disappear entirely within days. The ceremonial markings from the challenge had been washed away, but he still looked every inch the warrior king, dangerous and beautiful in equal measure. "I can't help it," she admitted. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. For someone to realize I don't belong here and—" "Alara." He crossed to her, his hands settling on her shoulders. "You faced down the man who murdered your grandmother today. You stood in my throne room wearing my collar and told him exactly who you are. You didn't cower. You didn't apologize for existing. Do you know how extraordinary that is?" I was terrified. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite it. His hands slid down her arms, leaving warmth in their wake. "You're remarkable. When will you see that?" She wanted to argue, to deflect, but the look in his eyes stopped her. He believed it. Truly, completely believed she was something special. "I'm just a healer," she whispered. "You're my mate." He said it simply, like it was the most fundamental truth in the universe. "And that makes you extraordinary by default." The word mate still sent shivers through her. They'd used it publicly, declared it to the pack, but they hadn't completed the bond. Not fully. The collar was a promise, a protection, but the true mate bond required something more. Something Alara both craved and feared. "Darius," she began, not sure how to voice what she was feeling. "The bond. Is it causing you pain? Being incomplete?" His eyes darkened, pupils dilating. "What makes you ask that?" "I've been reading." She gestured to the stack of books she'd borrowed from the library. "About shifter bonds. About what happens when they're formed but not consummated." Consummated. He repeated the words slowly, and heat flooded her cheeks. The book said that an incomplete bond can cause instability, that the wolf becomes restless, aggressive, that you'd feel— "I feel like I'm standing on the edge of a cliff," Darius interrupted, his voice rough. "Every moment with you is exquisite torture. Your scent, your voice, the way you look at me, it drives my wolf insane. But I've been waiting, Alara, giving you time to adjust, to be certain this is what you want." "And if I am certain?" The words came out breathier than she intended. His hands tightened on her arms. "Then you need to be very clear about what you're saying. Because once we complete this bond, there's no going back. You'll be mine in every way that matters. And I'll be yours, just as irrevocably." Alara's heart raced, but not with fear. With anticipation. With certainty that had been building since the moment she'd stepped forward in that throne room, since she'd held his hand through the night, since she'd watched him fight for her right to exist in his world. "I want this," she said. "I want you. All of you. The king, the wolf, the man who holds children and fights monsters and sees me as something more than I've ever seen myself." Darius made a sound low in his throat. half growl, half groan. If we do this now, the bond will fully form. You'll feel everything I feel. My wolf will recognize you as mate on every level. There's no hiding from it, no pretending it's less than it is. I don't want to hide. She reached up, her palm against his chest, feeling his heart thunder beneath her touch. I'm done hiding. From my past, from my feelings, from this. She met his burning gaze. From us, something in Darius broke, or perhaps finally aligned. He swept her into his arms, carrying her inside with preternatural speed. The door to the balcony swung shut behind them, and then his mouth was on hers, claiming, demanding, offering everything. The kiss was different from the gentle one they'd shared before the challenge. This was raw, desperate, full of the hunger they'd both been restraining. Alara melted into it, her hands tangling in his hair, her body pressing against his solid warmth. "Tell me if you want to stop," Darius murmured against her lips, even as his hands traced the curve of her spine. "At any moment, just say the word." "Don't you dare stop," she breathed. He laughed, the sound full of joy and relief and fierce possession. "As my mate commands." He lowered her to the bed with infinite care, his body covering hers. The silk robe she wore slipped away under his careful hands, and she should have felt vulnerable, exposed. Instead, she felt powerful, desired, cherished. "You're beautiful," Darius whispered, his lips trailing down her throat, pausing at the collar. "So damn beautiful it hurts to look at you." "Then don't look," Alara said, pulling him closer. "Just feel." What followed was a blur of sensation. Skin against skin, whispered promises, the slide of his body against hers. There was gentleness and urgency, tenderness and passion. Darius worshipped every inch of her, as if memorizing her by touch alone. And Alara discovered she could be equally demanding, equally hungry. When they finally joined, when the last barrier between them fell away, Alara felt something ignite in her chest, a warmth that spread through her entire body, bright and consuming. Through her closed eyelids, she saw golden light, felt power rush through her veins that wasn't her own. The mate bond, snapping into place like a key turning in a lock. She gasped, her back arching, and Darius held her through it, his own body shuddering as the bond completed from his side. She could feel him, not just physically, but emotionally. Every protective instinct, every surge of love, every desperate need to keep her safe and happy and his. "Alara," he groaned, his face buried in her neck. "My Alara. My mate. Mine." "Yours," she agreed, her hands gripping his shoulders as pleasure built and built until it crested in a wave that left them both trembling. Afterward, they lay tangled together, hearts racing in sync. Alara could still feel the bond humming between them, a living connection that pulsed with every beat. "Is it always like that?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "I don't know." Darius propped himself up to look at her, his eyes still glowing faintly. "I've never bonded before. But if what we just experienced is normal, I understand why wolves go insane trying to find their mates." She laughed, then winced. "I can feel you, your emotions. It's overwhelming." "It'll settle," he assured her, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "The bond is raw, right now, new. Give it time to stabilize and you'll learn to control what you feel from me and what you block out." "I'm not sure I want to block anything out," Alara admitted. "Feeling your love, it's incredible." His expression softened impossibly. "Then feel this." He took her hand, placing it over his heart. Through the bond, she felt the depth of his emotion. Love so fierce it was almost painful. Gratitude that she'd chosen him. Wonder at her courage. And beneath it all, an unshakable certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. Tears slipped down Alara's cheeks. I love you too. So much it terrifies me. Don't be terrified. He kissed away her tears. Be certain. Because I'm not letting you go. Not ever. You're stuck with me, little healer, for the rest of our very long lives. How long do shifters live? She asked suddenly, realizing she'd never thought to ask. Centuries, if we're lucky. He traced patterns on her bare shoulder. Does that scare you? Knowing. You'll age while I stay young? Alara was quiet for a moment, processing this new complication. The books didn't mention that. Because it's complicated. True mates, when the bond is this strong, sometimes the human partner's aging slows. Not stops, but slows considerably. He watched her carefully. We don't know why. Some think the bond itself changes human physiology. Others believe it's the constant exchange of energy through the connection. So, I might live for centuries too? Possibly. Or you might live a normal human lifespan, and I'll spend the rest of my very long existence alone. His voice cracked slightly. That's the risk I'm taking. That's what terrifies me. Alara pulled him down to her, holding him tight. Then we'll make every moment count. Whether we have 50 years or 500, we'll fill them with so much life that it'll be enough. Darius buried his face against her shoulder, and she felt his relief through the bond. Relief that she wasn't running, wasn't rejecting the complications of loving someone not human. They lay like that for a long time, just holding each other, feeling the bond settle into something less overwhelming, but no less profound. Eventually, Alara's stomach growled loudly, making them both laugh. When did we last eat? Darius asked, sitting up. Before the magistrate arrived, Alara realized. That was many hours ago. Stay here. He kissed her soundly. I'll raid the kitchens. You're going to raid your own kitchens? You're the king. You could just summon and wake the entire staff to gossip about how the Alpha King and his newly bonded mate are insatiable? He grinned. I'd rather maintain some dignity. He pulled on pants and padded out, leaving Alara wrapped in sheets and smiling like a fool. She could feel him through the bond, his amusement, his contentment, his lingering desire. It was extraordinary and intimate in a way she'd never imagined. She was just starting to doze when she felt something shift through the bond, Darius's alarm, sudden and sharp. Alara sat up, heart racing. Something was wrong. A moment later, Darius burst back through the door, his expression grim. In his hand was a note, the paper expensive, the seal unfamiliar. What is it? Alara asked, pulling on her robe. A message. It arrived tonight, but the guards didn't want to disturb us. His jaw clenched. It's from the Council of Alphas. They've heard about the magistrate's visit. About my refusal to turn you over. Alara's blood ran cold. And they're calling a summit. Every alpha in the Northern Territories, gathering to discuss whether I've violated the treaty between shifter and human lands. His eyes met hers, blazing with determination. They want to decide if harboring you is grounds for war. The warmth from their bonding evaporated, replaced by icy dread. Just when she'd thought they were safe, when she'd finally found peace. No. Darius pulled her against him, his arms bands of steel. Don't spiral. We'll face this together. Whatever they throw at us, we'll handle it. But what if they demand? They can demand whatever they want. I'm not giving you up. I don't care if I have to fight every alpha in the north. I don't care if I lose my crown. You're mine, Alara, and I protect what's mine. Through the bond, she felt his absolute certainty, his willingness to burn the world down rather than lose her. It should have terrified her. Instead, it made her feel invincible. Then let them come, she said, lifting her chin. Let them see what it means to threaten a bonded pair. Darius smiled, fierce and proud. "That's my mate." But as they held each other in the darkness, both of them knew the real battle was just beginning. Chapter 10. The Council's Judgment. Dawn broke over the mountain compound, painting the snow-capped peaks in shades of rose and gold. Alara stood at the bedroom window, wrapped in one of Kale's shirts, watching the sunrise. She could feel him behind her before he touched her, the bond humming like a tuning fork between them. "You're worried," he said softly, his arms encircling her waist. "I can feel your worry too," she admitted, leaning back against his chest. "It's strange, knowing what you're feeling." "The bond will settle," Kale assured her, his chin resting on top of her head. "Right now, it's new, intense. Eventually, we'll learn to soften it. Give each other privacy when needed." "I don't want privacy from you." The words came out fiercer than she intended. "Not after everything we've been through." He turned her in his arms, his eyes searching hers. "The council arrives in 3 hours. They'll question everything. Our bond, my judgment, your presence in pack territory. Some will call for your removal. Let them try." Alara's voice held a steel that surprised even her. A week ago, she would have cowered at such a threat. Now, with the mate bond thrumming through her veins and Kale's strength intertwined with her own, she felt capable of facing anything. Kale's expression shifted, pride mixing with concern. "That's what worries me. The bond has made you fearless. But these are ancient wolves, Alara. Alphas who've ruled for centuries. They won't respond well to defiance." "Then what do they respond to?" He considered this, his thumb tracing absent patterns on her hip. "Strength, respect, tradition. The problem is our bond breaks tradition. An alpha has never taken a human mate. They'll see it as weakness, a liability. Then we prove them wrong." She reached up, cupping his face. Through the bond, she felt his wolf stir, protective, possessive, ready to fight the world for her. "We show them that I make you stronger, not weaker." "You do," he murmured, leaning into her touch. "But they may not be willing to see it." The council gathered in the great hall, a cavernous room Alara hadn't seen before, deep in the heart of the compound. 7 alphas sat in a semicircle of ancient chairs, their combined power making the air thick and heavy. Alara felt Kale tense beside her as they entered. "Kale Thornridge," the center alpha spoke, a woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes like chips of amber ice. "You've called this council under unusual circumstances." "Alpha Moira." Kyle inclined his head respectfully. "I've called the council because my pack, and the shifter world at large, deserves transparency about recent events." "Transparency?" Another alpha laughed, a bear of a man with scarred knuckles and a cruel smile. "Is that what you call flaunting a human mate? Breaking centuries of tradition?" Alara felt anger spike through the bond, Kale's or hers, she couldn't tell. She squeezed his hand, sending calm through their connection. "The mate bond chooses," Kale said evenly. "It doesn't ask permission from tradition." "The mate bond," Moira's voice was measured, dangerous, "has never chosen a human. Are you certain this isn't simply infatuation? Misplaced protectiveness for someone you saved?" "I'm certain." Kale's voice carried the weight of absolute conviction. "The bond is complete, witnessed by my pack. I can feel her emotions, sense her presence. She carries my mark." The alphas leaned forward as one, their eyes fixing on Alara's neck where Kale's claiming mark was visible above her collar. She forced herself not to flinch under their scrutiny. "A mark can be faked," the bear alpha growled. "Human skin is soft, easily scarred. Then test it." Alara's voice rang out clear and strong. She felt Kale's surprise through the bond, his instinctive desire to protect her. She sent reassurance back. Whatever test you require, I'll submit to it. Silence fell over the hall. The alphas exchanged glances. Bold words, Moira said softly. But do you understand what you're offering, child? Some of our tests are painful, dangerous for humans. I understand. Alara met her gaze steadily. That I love him. That the bond between us is real. That I would rather die than have anyone question his honor or judgment because of me. She felt Kale's emotions surge through the bond, fierce pride mixed with terror at her words. His hand tightened on hers. There is one test. An older alpha spoke from the end of the semicircle. A man so ancient his hair was pure white, his face lined with centuries. An old rite, rarely used. If the mate bond is true, the human will be able to call the wolf forward without a full moon, without violence. The bond will be strong enough to bridge their natures. That's impossible, the bear alpha scoffed. No human has that kind of power. A true mate might, the ancient alpha countered. In the old stories, before we lost the practice of human mates, it's said the bond gave humans the ability to touch their mate's wolf directly. Moira studied Alara with new intensity. Are you willing to try? Alara looked at Kale. Through the bond, she felt his uncertainty. He didn't know if this was possible either. But beneath that, she felt his trust in her. Yes, she said. They moved to the center of the hall. The alphas formed a circle around them, their power pressing down like a physical weight. Kyle stood before her, his eyes meeting hers. I don't know how to do this, she whispered, suddenly terrified. What if I can't? Then we leave, Kale said firmly. We'll go somewhere the council can't reach us. And abandon your pack? Your responsibility? She shook her head. No, we do this. She reached up, placing both hands on either side of his face. The bond between them glowed bright and warm, that golden thread she'd felt during their mating. She focused on it, letting herself sink deeper into the connection. Show me, she thought through the bond. Let me see all of you. Kyle's eyes flashed gold. She felt his wolf surge forward, not with aggression, but with curiosity, recognition. The wolf knew her, had known her from that first moment in the forest when he'd stood between her and Marcus. Trust me, she sent through the bond. Then she did something that felt as natural as breathing. She pulled, not with her hands, but with her soul, with the bond that connected them. She pulled his wolf forward, called to it the way she might call someone's name across a distance. The transformation began. But it was different from every shift she'd seen before. There was no pain, no violence. Kale's body flowed like water, muscles and bones reshaping with impossible grace. The massive black wolf emerged fully, standing before her in the center of the hall. The alphas inhaled sharply as one. The wolf's eyes were fully Kale's, human intelligence shining through animal form. He pressed his massive head against her chest, a rumbling sound that was almost a purr rising from his throat. Alara wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face in his fur. Through the bond, she felt everything. His wolf's acceptance of her, his human consciousness marveling at the ease of the transformation, his absolute certainty that she was his mate. Impossible, someone breathed. The old magic, the ancient alpha said with wonder. I never thought I'd see it in my lifetime.